All right. So we're going to deal with building a team for success. Now, the thing that I want us to do is I want us to not overanalyze or evaluate the word success. Sometimes when we deal with success, we deal with comparisons. And so what we deem as successful, we compare ourselves to that. But as the two presenters before me, as Paul has stated, talking about differences, as Pete has talked about dealing with the poor, sometimes in our urban context, our team may not look like the success team from, I don't know, Saddleback, or one of the big churches that we may compare ourselves to. So the first thing is I want us to, when I think about team, I think about, I relate everything to sports, okay? Because I'm an ex-sports guy. I played football, basketball, ran track, and I played baseball. So everything for me is about teams. So when you look at teams, teams are built on what? Being a team and not a team of individuals, okay? So when we compare, how many Laker fans do I have? Do we have any Laker fans? Because I'm a diehard Laker fan. Big time, man. You know what I'm saying? So the difference between the Lakers this season and Golden State is that the Lakers didn't play as a team. They played as a group of individuals. Golden State played as a team. That's why they're in the championship. So it does not take a whole lot of players and a whole lot of big names to get to the championship. It just takes teamwork. All right? So what I want us to do today is I want us to realize that there's two people who were big-time church planners, Jesus and Paul.
Yes.
Okay? Jesus was a church planner for the simple fact that he got together 12 dysfunctional men and were able to revolutionize the community.
Yes.
He was able to send out 72, 2 by 2, and to go into different parts and to evangelize. Jesus was a major church planner.
Yes.
And I think sometimes we forget that when we talk about Jesus. We talk about Jesus as a healer, as a way maker, as our rose of Sharon, as our morning dew, but we never talk about Jesus as a church planner. Jesus was a major church planner.
Yep.
And it was because of Jesus having that church planner DNA is where we get Paul from.
That's right.
Paul went into different ways, but the thing about Paul that I like so much is Paul was bivocational. So for those of us that are here, that are church planners, that are part of church planning teams, we got to realize that Paul still had a job.
Yes.
He was a tent maker. Paul still had to work. So for some of us, we're still working and planning a church. I know it can be hard. I've done it, and I am doing it. To be bivocational, you still got to feed your family and at the same time feed the flock that God has assigned to you.
Yes.
And sometimes in the urban context, both are going to come out of what you do.
Yes.
Somebody didn't hear me on that one. Sometimes what you feed your family and what you feed your church are going to come out of the same pocket.
Yes.
Because if you're in the urban setting, as we've talked about, everybody that's in your church doesn't necessarily have a job, but they still need groceries.
Yes.
They still need their light bill paid. They still need glasses.
Yes.
So these are things that we have to realize when we talk about a team. So when we talk about a team, we got to realize when you say the word team, I want that to relate to you such as body and family.
Yes.
That's what team means. When we look at it, Steve Gray did a study of 112 church plants. 88% of the fastest growing church plants use a team approach to church planting. 88.5% of struggling church plant teams do not use a church plant team. So those that don't have a team are not successful. Those that do have a higher return.
Yes.
So you cannot, if you don't get anything else out of this, okay, and I just got to be real with y'all. I'm not one that uses a whole lot of big words and highfalutin and all that kind of stuff. If you don't get nothing else out of this, stop having your Messiah complex. Mm-hmm. You cannot plant a church if you have your cape on. Some of y'all won't get that until you get down the hill and get on the 5 freeway and you're like, oh, that's what Pastor Cedric was talking about. Take your cape off. You can't save everybody. That's not your job. I'm a big Batman fan. I love Batman. I have a t-shirt that has Batman. When I put that shirt on, that means I'm going to save Gotham City. So if the kids get in trouble at school, they need me, I put my Batman shirt on, we're going to say, that's Gotham City for me. Some of us think that we can go in and save the city by ourselves. You cannot. You need a team.
Yes.
Because you cannot do everything. My great-grandfather told me that God only gives a man what he needs at that time.
Yes. Right.
Which means that you don't have the capacity to know everything that community needs. Therefore, God has not given you the capacity to do it by yourself, but to acquire a team to be able to carry out the vision that you have.
Yes.
If your vision does not scare you for church planting, it ain't big enough.
That's good.
It ain't big enough. I have been awakened every day for the last 6 months at 3 a.m.
Yes.
Because my vision scares the heck out of me. Okay? So, this is what we need. This is what we need. We got 10 things that I want us to pay attention to as far as building a team. Before we get into that, look at Ecclesiastes 4, verses 9 through 12. 2 are better than 1, because they have good reward for the toil. For if they fall, one will lift up his fellow. But woe to him who is alone when he falls and has not another to lift him up. Again, if 2 lie together, they keep warm, but how can one keep warm alone? And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him. A threefold cord is not quickly broken. That was the text that my father gave to me on the day that I said I do to my bride. Because he wanted me to know that now you all are a team.
Yes.
But that your team is kept together by a third person that may not always be visible, which is God himself.
Yes.
So when you look at teams, the first thing I want you to realize, if you have not already done it, you got to get a prayer team. We are over 2 months in relaunching our church in the city of Watts, and I have to tell you that we have folks that were praying for us, folks that were calling and texting and saying, we praying for you, we praying for you. You need a prayer team. Each team needs at least 10 prayer partners. At least. Each member of your team needs 5 prayer partners. So if you got 20 people on your team, do the math. And like Paul, if it's Chinese math, just figure it out. Because math wasn't my strong suit. Use Paul's math. But if you got a team of 20, each person needs 5 prayer partners. So you can tell that's how many people need to be praying for your church plant. How you work that? Use your partners. Go to your church. Go to your home church. Go to churches that you have associated with. Ask the pastor, can you ask the folks to fill out a prayer card? And know that those folks are praying for you. But you need prayer. You cannot do this thing by yourself. So the first thing, we got 10 things we're going to look at, and we're going to go through this thing real quick. What I want you to do is I'm a Maserati, which means that I come fast and I burn rubber when I come through, but you don't know I was here. All right? So we got 10 things. The first thing is articulation. Articulation. You have got to make plain what you want.
Yes.
Articulation is the why and the what. Why are we here? And what are we doing? And those are 2 questions that you may have to revisit multiple times. So if you are not a patient person, pray for patience. Because folks are going to come to you, and sometimes folks will ask you time and time again. Part of my vocation is that I'm a minister at the same time. I'm a financial coach, so I have my own business. And what I do is sometimes I go out and I help people with their investments. I help people with life insurance, and I sit down and we go through this barrage of things. And when I deliver their life insurance policy, I go back over it again. And do you know that within 2 weeks, They call me and say, Cedric, how much life insurance do I have? And okay, tell me again, why do I need this? When I've already told them the what and the why. My point is, your people are going to come back to you and say, what are we doing? Why are we doing this again? So you've got to be sure to articulate, which means with clarity, make it very clear what you're doing. If we are here, it's like McDonald's. You know what you get at McDonald's. That ain't going to change. McDonald's is burgers. That's what they do. Don't go to McDonald's and ask them for some fried chicken. They're not going to have it. They have articulated who they are and what they do. You've got to articulate who you are as the church planter. Second thing is incorporation. Incorporation is very, very important for the simple fact that you are going to have to incorporate some folks. That means you've got to be welcoming.
Yes.
Means you've got to be able to receive. You've got to be able to accept. You've got to be able to allow people to come in and be a part of this thing. We are church planters. We are not exclusive club designers.
No.
We're not country clubs where you need to pay a fee and you got to be the certain thing and you got to look the certain way. No, we're church.
Yes.
Therefore, we need to be incorporating the folks that come from, as we've learned, different sides of the track. Everybody in the church don't have to look like you. They don't have to have your income. They don't have to live in your zip code. They don't have to have your political outlook. Incorporate. Once you incorporate, then that leads you to the third one, cooperation.
Yes.
Now, cooperation is very, very tricky. Because sometimes cooperation can become very taxing, especially for those of us who are church leaders. Amen. Because cooperation means that you've got to be okay with a diverse way of thinking. Because everybody is not going to do it the way that you do it. I'll give you a case in point. Because, okay, some of you all probably won't meet my wife, but if you do, just tell her I said that she's the greatest thing since sliced bread. My wife is very funny. She's been stretched as far as our church plant because she likes to do things a certain way. The thing is, everybody don't do it your way. So you've got to be okay with incorporating them in and then being able to cooperate with them to still get the job done.
Yes.
It's like with my children. She gets a little testy because they don't put the dishes in the dishwasher right. Okay. Did they put the dishes in the dishwasher? Sometimes you just got to go with the bare necessities. Did they get the dishes in the dishwasher? Yes, they did. Great. Turn it on. Let's wash them. Because at least they cooperated and got the job done. So folks may not do it the way that you do it, but at least they took your words and your leadership and put it into practice. All right? Next thing, identification. You've got to identify who is on your team. Identification is very important. Number of ways you can do it. We did the fivefold ministry style. Those that are apostolic, those that are pastors, those that are evangelists, those that are shepherds, those that are teachers. We did that so that I could identify who I had on my team. Because identification is very key. Yes. If you have someone who is not a morning person, and your service starts at 9 o'clock, and this person is not a morning person, I mean, they are a total grouch. They are grumpy from the 7 drawers. You may not want to have them as your greeter. I'm just saying, if they're not morning people, and you have a morning service, and they say, well, Pastor, I want to greet, you might need to direct them into a different way. Because when people come and they grumpy, then they're not going to be what? Incorporating of folks. Because people are going to turn around and leave because you got that one at the door. You've got to identify who is on your team, and you sometimes have to let them know where their strengths are.
Yes.
Some people don't know what their strengths are. So you've got to identify, you've got to interview, you've got to assign, you've got to be willing to take folks and help them to identify what they are good at. Next thing, organization.
Yes.
Organization is procedural and organization is structural.
Yes.
Okay? Procedural is, that involves setting goals. You've got to set goals for your organization. What are your benchmarks? Where do you want to be 6 months from now, 12 months from now? Where do you want to be 2 years down the line? Our church plant has a 5-year plan. Where we want to be in 5 years. Structurally, what does that mean as far as leadership is concerned? Who are your leaders? Have you defined who they are? Have you trained them? Have you helped them to identify that they are leaders? Most people will not come to you and say that, hey, Pastor, I'm a leader. If they do, be very cautious with that. I'm just saying, the average person, and what I've seen in my years of church planning, you don't have people just walking up to the front saying, yeah, I want to be the next leader in this church. But most people are leaders. If you are a husband, if you're a wife, if you work on a job, if you are the baseball coach for your son's little league team, if you work with your daughter as far as her dance group, whatever the case might be, you have leadership qualities. You just think that they're different sometimes when it comes to church work. But they're not. You just change the title, or sometimes not have a title. But you've got to be able to have a structure to wherein you have leaders that are in place, because leaders will take the burden off of you. I'm here to tell you.
Yes.
Church planning, and this is a side note, I'm not going to say will, has the potential of destroying a marriage. I'm just going to tell you. It's hard. But you've got to be willing to delegate. You've got to be willing to give folks responsibility, and giving them responsibility sometimes means that you've got to allow for them to mess up in your eyes and use it as a teachable moment. Organize, organize. Next thing is preparation. Preparation. You've got to prepare. You've got to practice. From playing on a number of teams, the one thing that we did that I noticed was a lot of times when we would practice, the guys on the team that was considered the superstars would kind of sit out practice sometimes because they would get tired and they didn't want to do it. That showed up in the game, because those were the guys that, as we went along and as the game got tough, they were going on the sideline, and the guys that worked hard in practice were still on the field. How you practice is how you will play.
Yes.
So if you're not doing well in the practice part of church planning, wherein you're not doing well with the leadership development, you're not doing well with the Bible study, you're not doing well with the discipleship, that will come out at some point. That's got to come out at some point. So you've got to be prepared. You've got to prepare for this thing. You cannot just wake up on Sunday morning and say, hey, we're going to do church. The funny thing, if you ask Bernard, if you ask Curtis, if you ask Pete, if you ask Hank, if you ask Nate, we're working on ministries and sermons and sermon series 4-6 months ahead. But you got to be prepared for that. You got to be ready for that. The other thing is called implementation. Implementation is nothing but delegation and execution. Once you delegate it, then you have to sometimes push people to execute it.
Yes.
The funny thing is this. My wife and I, we have we got 5 kids, and we have a set of triplets that are 15. I had to do my count real quick. We got a set of triplets that are 15. So we try to delegate to them their responsibilities. So we say to them, okay, now it's your responsibility to wash your clothes. I can easily tell you that 2 out of the 3 get their clothes washed. That third one, he gets the clothes to the washer, but they never seem to get inside of the washer to be washed. His execution is off. So that means that we have to sometimes follow behind him and assist him in executing the plan of washing the clothes. You have to do that as a church planter. You have to do that with your supporting team members. If you're the core team, you have to then sometimes work with those who are the supporting team on execution. They're not just going to do it because you said do it. The next thing is coordination. You've got to coordinate. That means you've got to coach. That means you've got to work. That means you've got to help those folks to coordinate and understand their strengths and their weaknesses and how to push through this thing. The next thing is evaluation. Evaluation. Evaluation is very important. Just this last week, I sent out a survey to our core team to find out how we were doing after 2 months. Asking certain questions and having them respond so that I could see where they are, where their minds are, how they feel about the church plant. You've got to be able to evaluate where you are, and don't be so caught up in yourself that you can't take constructive criticism. Church planting is like parenting. There's no book that can tell you how to parent your kid because your kid is your kid. Your church is your church. The last thing is be able to, and if nothing else, this 10th one is my favorite because it's my middle name. Pastor Cedric, adaptability Nelms. You got to adapt. Adaptation. You've got to be willing to change up sometimes. Every way that it may be done, it may not be the right way to do it. You've got to be willing to change. You've got to be willing to maybe tweak some things. You've got to be willing to sometimes look at things a little bit differently. Because when it comes to a team, you have different moving parts and everybody is not the same. But if you're not willing to adapt, then you're going to be frustrated and they're going to think everything is okay. You got to be willing to be okay with change. Change is good, change is healthy, but you got to be able to walk through it. So as far as building a team for success, if I had to leave you with some things, like 3 words, I would say practice, delegate, execute. In my own contemporary way, I would say need for we. Need for we. I woke some of y'all up with that. I like that. I do that kind of stuff on purpose. There's a need for we. There is no I in team. Did you translate that all right, Robert? You know, all right. Okay. There's a need for the we part of a team. Because sometimes at the end of the day, we feel like we are on an island. And if you're really honest with yourself, as a church planter, you sometimes feel like you're the only person on this island, but you're not. You have a team that supports you, but if your team doesn't know that you need help, how is your team functioning at a healthy level? They got to know, and you got to be able to tell them. You've got to be able to put your parts in place so that it supports you. Any questions?